So the first question is Python. So answer should be high level programming language. And then the second one quite confusing, I guess. Um, the answer, I will show you this in the, okay, maybe I will get a window idle and then I will share the answer. And let me explain why we are getting this. Right, the division, okay. Um, So when it comes to divisions, you have to be very careful when we talk about work with the numbers. Now, in this particular case, we are dividing 4 by 2. So if you have done this, this is a division. And then when you divide, you will get actually it as a floating point number. It's not really 2. No, it will not take it as a, if it is a decision, the output will be always float. So that's what I actually try to check whether you have understood that one. So when we say 4 divided by 2, yes, you might think that it's a integer, but no, when it comes to division, it always takes as a floating point number. So that's the second one. And then integer output, I think almost all got the correct answers. The converter functions when you use, in this particular case, we have 3.999. We are getting integer part of it, so that's 3. Invalid variable name. So when it comes to Python, we discuss couple of rules. You need to, when you're creating variables, for example, it should start with the character, alphabet, or a underscore, right? So probably if you look at the variable numbers, so you can use this. So pi, actually you might think it's reserved word. No, because in Python, I will come to that later today. So you can use it, that name, but dash, it's not allowed. So that's why the answer is the first one. Okay, probably this might be the other issue. The second one, when we discuss, what we had there was 6 plus 3 into 5 uh, divide by 1 into 3. This is power of exponentiation. So which means when you look at this, first of all, you work on this power, which means 1 into 3 to the power 3. So that means this part is 1. And then you will have multiplication next. So then you have the division. Then this becomes, or it could be any way, because multiplication division, you have the same priority. So that means this is 15 divided by 1. So that means it's 15 plus 6, you will get 21. Right. I think the issue might be like you might not familiar with this symbol. So that literally gives you the power of. And then when it comes to this one, it will be the same. So that we have 2 to the power 3 plus 6, that you will get 14. And this one got almost everyone, the answer. In print statement, you can comma separate the value. So in this case, we have the string value price as well as a floating value 3.99. So in default, you will have a space in between. So the answer is the second one. Finally, this one, I think I didn't remember whether we have discussed this. This is actually not really multiplication. So this is actually string value. And this is 3. You multiply it by 3. This actually represents repetition in strings. So what will happen there? This string will repeat it 3 times. So the answer becomes like 3 stars in this particular case. Right? So this is what we have discussed last time. We discussed some applications in Python, and then also we started with the basics. The plan for today is I'm going to continue from there, and then we will look at control structures today, how selection repetitions happen in Python, plus the data structures, the different ways of store data, which will give you the basis for the next session. So in the next session, we are going to use, work with the matrices. But for that, we need the basics that we are going to cover today. Uh, Before we move on to the next, I would like to, if you have any questions, I would like to answer. Questions, comments? Okay, so let's move to the next one. Can one of you tell me where exactly we have stopped last time? So we discussed the different types of numbers, the type function, and then different ways of representing strings in Python, and then variable namings, keywords, assignment, statements, arithmetic operators we have done.
Yes, Digal.
Yeah, we have done this, right? And then order of operations. And then I think this is the place we are,
Yeah.
we have to start. Okay, so
Yes.
the last question actually based on this. So I expect most of you will actually get, did not get the correct answer for this one. Okay, now the arithmetic operation usually we perform on, the numbers, but, and then there'll be an order, right? So the previous, expression, so the same rules that we actually apply, we have to use it here as well. That means you will start with the parentheses, then exponentiation, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. But if you have the same priority, you go from left to right. So that I think everybody knows this. But let me start with the operations that you will see on the string as well. It's not really arithmetic operations that we have discussed earlier. Now this is addition. It's not really addition. When it comes to strings, we use the name string concatenation, which means you combine the string. So if you see plus between two string values, the meaning is you just combine them, right? And then you will have, you will get a single string. So let me quickly show you this in Python interface. Right, in this particular case, now when you want to represent something output, when you're creating an output, so you can just say we have banana and then plus, then we have nut, space nut. Right, so this is two strings and then you get a single string. So this is called a string concatenation, not really addition, right? So beware that if you have two numbers like this, 20 plus 30, but in this case the numbers are represented as string values, so we are getting like in string concatenation, not addition, right? If you have any questions while I'm continuing, please post your questions in the chat. The next one is repetition, we call it. Now for example, multiplication you can together with the string, right? Fun. So this is the example I have given in the handout. And then 3. So which means no, you are not really multiplying, you are repeating. So this will give you,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Sampath, sorry to interrupt. I do not know whether it is my fault or rather my connection fault. I see a screen without changing, fun into 3 repetition 1. Is it my issue or are you changing the screen?
No, sir. That's the switch to screen. Thanks, sir. I have not noticed it. This is what I'm trying to explain. So sorry. So what I have explained here is banana and nut bread. So these two strings, it will combine, concatenate. And if it is a number, and if the numbers are represented as a string, still you will get concatenation, right? So if you want to, really perform the addition, then you need these converter functions. And then fun, this is what I was explaining. So when you have multiplication with the string value, right? This will repeat. Now in this particular case, we have fun string value 3 times. So it will repeat 3 times. So similarly in the quiz, actually what I put is a asterisk, and then I multiplied by 3 times. It repeats 3 times. So in earlier, when we didn't have graphical user interfaces, also this is how people actually use textual interfaces, create textual interfaces like this. Even if you have like dashes, if you multiply, let's say 30 times, you get dash line like this. And if you use underscore, for example, so if you're writing a very small script, and then you would use Python for that, you can use these techniques if you want to build a simple interface. Okay, right. Let's move to the next one then. The next, actually, what I want to discuss, the converter functions. Now, we have already seen that if you add two strings together, it will concatenate. But if you have numbers, if you want to add them up, you have to sometimes convert into different forms. Now, already we had a question converting a floating point number to integer, right? And sometimes floating point number to string value and so on. So that's exactly what we are going to discuss here. So you can use converter functions int to convert something integer. To convert something to float, it's float, and convert to something to string, it's string. But remember that you can't, convert all the values, right? I will give you an examples. Right? If I quickly switch to my other window, right now, for example, 3.14, you know that it's a floating point number. So you can use int 3.14. So it will give you the integer part of it. String 3.14 will convert it to a string value, right? And then similarly, if you have, let's say, 3, and if you want to convert float 3 into floating point number, you will get a 3.0, so a floating point. So you can convert in between. But remember, if you have something like this, int, but you know that what is inside is a string value, right? With a decimal point. So then actually you will get an error. But if it is like this, it will work. Let's say if it is 3, then it will convert it as an integer value. So convert functions, try it out. In the handout, I will put up some exercises. So that part will not be that difficult. Next is the input. So getting inputs in Python. So there is a function called input function where you can use for that. So let me switch to that one. So input function could be used to get something from the user, right? And then whatever you want to show to the user can be put as an argument for the input function. For example, if you want to display it as a please enter your name, yes, you put inside the input. And then this is an assignment where if you want to keep that value for the processing. But remember, whatever you get from here, it'll be a string value, right? It could be a name, it could be a number, whatever it is. As it is, if you use input function, it will take it as a string value. So you have to be very careful. If you're expecting a number, then you have to use a converter function. Now the second one you will see, we have an input function, and then outside we have a converter function. And here we are expecting a number, right? Now let me quickly demonstrate in my case. So we can go to input. If you just type input, this is what will happen. If you just type input, it won't go to the next and it will wait, right? So it's wait for the input. So let me put something, then it will display as a string value. But let's say I want to input a name, you can say enter your name. So then actually it will display and wait for the user input. So let me put Sampa, and it's still that's there. If you need to further process this, then you can actually take it and store in a variable. So in this particular case, if I say Sampa, the input is stored in n. For example, if you say print n, it will print it as Sampa. And if you say type in, I told you the input is a string value. Right. Now, if you are taking even a number, let's say I will put it like this, again n input, enter a number, yes, say 3, right? So if you say print in, it will print 3, but if you get type in, still it will take at a string. So what you need to do is when you are getting an input, you need to convert. Now, for example, if you are expecting to get an integer value, then you can use convert a function int outside of input function. So in like this way, so in this particular case, it will say enter number, let me say 3. And then when you say, okay, for example, type n, which will give you the type of the number. So that is now int. Right. Why don't you just try this in your machines and let me know if you have any questions. I told you like two ways of executing the Python statements. One is install Python, I showed you last time, and use the idle sessions, or else you can go to Colab environment in Google, right? So let me show you that one as well. I'm going to click new notebook for today's session. So let me start with what we have done earlier. So you will see the display. The output will be displayed there itself. So usually initially it will take some time, but then we'll get. Okay, so I'm getting another code window. Let me show you like int, let's say 3.14 when you're running. You don't have to try in both ways. This is to show you like in case if you do not have installed Python in your machine, you can just go to the Colab environment, colab.research.google.com. This is the website you have to visit in case if you want to go there. Right, let me take another code window. Okay, so let's take, this will be slightly different if you do this here, input, enter number. So if you run it, you have a, box like this comes in, you can put a number. That's all. So if you want to print it, let's say print in, and it's, if you want to have type in, you can put it in this way. When you run it, it will request a number. So let me put 3. So it says the next one print in, it will print 3. The next one is a type in, the type will be string. If you have completed this task, can you please let me know in the chat so that I can move to the next one. So now let's say you want to, printing, we said print, and within the brackets, you can put whatever you want to print. If you want to print multiple values, use comma separator. You can use different the types, that means data types here, right? And how do you know exactly how you are going to put print? So go to help. So there's a function called help, and you can access the Python help from there. Now, for example, if I want to get how exactly we need to print, you can say help print, and this will give you a documentation exactly how you put print there. Right now, for example, here you will say print. This is a built-in function, print in module built-ins. Print value, this 3 dot says that you can have multiple values. And then SCP here, separation. Now the values are separated using the default is space, and the n is a new line. So likewise it go on. So you can use this. So multi-value is possible, right? Print, I told you price, comma 3.99 will tell us these two values. The values are separate using a space. Let's say I want to use a colon. So I can say print price 3.99, and then you say separation you can define. Let's say if you want to separate value using a colon, you can put it like this, and that will using this part I have seen through the documentation. So documentation is string inserted between values, default space. So I'm changing space into a colon here. So we'll get price colon 3.9. So that's the simple outputs in Python. So in the handout, actually, I am putting a couple of things. You can try those out. Right. Let me discuss a little bit more on this. So you can have formatted output we call a string modulo operator or percentage symbol to work on more on printing, right? So in this particular case, let me quickly go to here. So let's say we have a number A. I'm going to define as a 1, 2, 3, 4.5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then if you say print A, it will print as it is. Now, if you are familiar with the C programming language, you already know this. But assuming from the beginning, now let's say if you want only a integer part of this, using formatting output, we can put it in this way. So we can say print, and here we will define the string modulo operator and a number. Say in this particular case I put 7 to say that I need 7 digits within 7 digits, I would like to print the number as a integer value. So you put D here. And then modulo operator, you put it here. That is, we call format string here. So this one is a format string. That means we put 7 places with and also the integer part. And then we say whatever the number. So after the modulo operator, I will put A. So you will see the number is printed, only the integer part of it, 1, 2, 3, 4. But I specify here 7. So it actually allocates 7 spaces or characters to represent the number 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. If you need it as a floating point number, and let's say you want to limit into 2 decimal places, so this is how we will put the formatting script. And then number of digits are the same, 7, and with put a dot, and then I can specify how many decimal places I want to keep, and I can do and specify it as a floating point number. And if I put A, right, so we will get 1 2 3 4.57. Remember, this is rounding off, right? The number will be rounded off to print the final answer. Now, to display for 3 decimal places, so then I can change this. Even without a starting number, I can put this. Now, for example, I can say 0.3 f. So I'm not to specify any number of characters here. And then you can just put A, right? So we'll get the answer like this. Now, this is interesting that this formatting string actually you can use to the way you can print anything. Now, for example, I want to say that this is a price. Let's say I want to form it as a print. I can say price. This will print as it is, rupees. And then let's say I want to specify the number. Formatted string, I will put 7.2f. And then we will have modulo operator and we will put A. So this will say the price is 1234.57. So it limit to 2 decimal places. So if we are doing this in the Colab environment, you can just say print we'll have 7.2, that is formatting string, and then let's say A. Remember, I have to define what A is, equals Yes, I missed D here, so that's why it says error. Let's see F. Okay. Okay. If you have multiple values, now you might think, how do you print multiple values? Let me quickly show you how you may print multiple values. So I'm going to use the same value to print the number with 2 decimal places and 1 decimal place like this. So I'm going to say print. So the first one I'm going to print with 2 decimal places, and then I'm going to say and. Then I'm going to print it with the same number with the 1 decimal places. But when you want to put the values, remember, you have to put it as a tuple, the word tuple. I will explain this later on, the way of storing images, the values. So this is called, this representation here is called tuple. So I'll discuss this later on. So the numbers are put in the rounding brackets like this, comma separated values. It's called tuple. So you put the multiple values inside the tuple like this. When you press enter, yes, you see the way it actually print. Okay, one more output I want to discuss. That is actually we call Pythonian way, or else how Python programmers represent output. So in this particular case, it'll use like dictionary format. I will explain later on what this format is. And within the curly brackets, we represent values, right? Now, for example, let me go back again just to explain you how exactly this format works. So this is formatted out. We use it format, function. Let me share my idle environment as well as Colab environment, right? So we can put it like this. So the num a is the same thing. We can say print, and in using format, right? The format is string, slightly different from previous one. You have curly brackets. The index will be 0. The 0 means that the first value. First value we want to put it in 2 decimal places like this. So that's what it means, right? So in this particular case, this is the format history. So what it says that the value of the first one should be a 2 decimal floating point number. Dot format a. So you will get like this. Whatever the additions, it will print as it is. Now, for example, if I take this one, if I put, let's say, rupees before this, right? Rupees, like this, it'll add it. So one single string, the similar way in earlier, but we use a dot and with the format. Multiple values are also the same. Now, if I were to do the same thing in previously, that means using modulo operator, right? So the modulo operator thing, if I want to print it as it is, so you can say print. We have to use curly brackets here to represent numbers. So curly brackets, the first number is 2 decimal floating point number with 2 decimal places. And the second one, index will be 1. If you're not familiar with the index, I'll come to that point. For the time being, let's go as it is. 7.1 F, that means the floating point number with the 1 decimal place. So this is the format string, and when you say dot format, and within that one you put the value as a comma. So you will get this. So I will just copy paste this one in the Colab environment just to see the output. Any questions before we move to the next one? The in control structures, the one thing we are going to start with looking at the Boolean type. So right now we discussed three things: integer type, floating point, float type, and string. And the fourth one we will discuss is called Boolean. So basically, when you have put up a conditions, I hope everyone is familiar with some programming language. So we will have true and false in two values. So it's true and false, and usually we put up like true and false like this. Make sure that the first letter is capital, otherwise you will get errors, right? And then the comparison operators. So you know that most of the time when you put up a condition in a control structures, we are putting some comparison operators like less than, greater than, less than or equal, greater than, equal. Okay, not equal to, you have two equal signs, and not equal to, you have exclamation mark and equal sign. So these are the things that you need to remember sometimes when you want to write it down. And these comparison operators you can combine with logical operators. You know about AND operator, where you expect both the statements should be true to evaluate the whole expression to be evaluated as true. Now, for example, here you will see if you want to check a particular value x is between 0 and 10, this is the way that we can put. So we will ask here, we will check here whether x is greater than 0. And here we will check whether the x is less than 10. And when you put AND operator, what happens is we are expecting the x value of x is greater than 0 as well as less than 10. So that means it's between 0 and 10. Next, operator, basically if one of these expressions is true, then the whole expression becomes true. That means in here, if you remember this modulus, which means the remainder, so we will check here whether when the number is divided by the 2, the remainder we are checking whether it's 0. That means number is divisible by 2. Next one, number modulo operator 3. So that means the remainder, if it is, we are checking whether it's equal to 0. That means we are checking whether the number is divisible by 3. When you say operate in between, it means if the number n is divisible by 2 or 3. And then you have a not operator that you want to get the opposite of anything. Now here we have checking x is greater than y. And when you put not, what it means, we are checking whether x is not greater than y, right? Not. So if this x greater than y is false, then x less than y is true, right? Okay, and then let's start with the selection. So for that we have if, else, and elif. If else, I hope you are familiar, but elif means else if. So when you have multiple nested if statements, you can have elif statement. Right. Now here is a small example I will give you in a floating, as a flow chart. And then let's say how to put this in Python. Right. Let me start. So in this particular case, what we are going to do, we are going to get a number and we'll check if it is less than 0. If so, we multiply the number by -1, so that if the number is negative, we make it positive and we print out, right? So let's start. So I will go back to my, and also the Colab environments. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm getting a number from the user, right? So the code is, I will write it as a separate file, new file, and then I will type it as a separate code, right? So I put it in this way. So I'm getting a number from the user. So we already know, let me put number as the variable name. I'm getting an integer value, int, let's say input, enter number. Right. So that's the first step. Now we are going to check. Now if it is a negative number, we are going to hold the value of the number. Otherwise, we will not going to do anything. So that means we can say if we can check whether the number is less than 0. If so, we are going to do this. What we are going to do is we are going to multiply the number by -1. And then we'll print the output, print the absolute value. And then we can put up a number. Okay, let me save it. File, save. We have Python workshop folder where it is. Let's say it's whether it's a C. Let me create new folder. You can say Python workshop. I'm going to name it as ABS, absolute value. Right. Now I'm going to run it, run module. And then in this window, we will get the enter a number. So let's put 5. We'll get the absolute value as 5. Let me run one more time. This time I'm going to do this -15. Yes, it says the absolute value is 50. So what happens this statement, if the number is a negative number, you multiply the number by -1. So this is a very simple statement. If I do the same in Colab environment, you can just get the code environment. You can just say print. You can run it. If it is -15, yes, you enter 15 and then you get the answer as the absolute value is 15. Now, one thing to note here is this spacing is very, very important, right? When you type it, it automatically comes. But remember, when you're typing, you have to keep the space, indentation we call it. It's very, very important. So the spaces we put is we call indentation, and in Python there's no, for example, if you go back, you will see there's no end if, or there's no blocks, curly brackets like in C. Nothing is there, nothing. The only way to block the statement is Python is use of this indentation. So usually we use 4 spaces for the indentation. So if it will not come and automatically, usual value is you use 4 spaces. So the default value is 4 spaces. But if you change it, then you get an error message. Now, for example, if you go back, let me put this. Now, let's say I'm going to remove this spacing. I'm going to change it like this. And if you try to run it, then it says indentation error, which means we are getting an error on not properly indenting the statements. So that means you have to put spaces. So depend on your settings, you can change the number of spaces, but the default value is, as I told you earlier, it's 4 spaces. So if you are getting an indentation error, that means you have not properly blocked your code, right? So there could be some errors in when you're actually putting into blocks. So if there's a error, you will get this indentation error. Okay, Dr. Jared, can you share your screen? I will allow everyone to share.
I'm using a different computer to try Python. Then let me log in from that computer also.
Right, okay. Or else if you can copy paste the error message, exact error message, then I can help. So anyway, I allowed multiple participants can share. If you have any questions, issues in your output, you can share the screen with me so that I can help you out. Okay. This is not semicolon, so you have to put a colon, sir. So the best thing would be, sir, you create it as a separate script. Go to file and new window. Can you go to file and just go to, okay, new file. Yes. Type the code in that window, because this shell usually we use to check, shorter, functions. But if you are going to write a couple of blocks, maybe best would be you put it into a window.
Right, thanks. I will try it.
No, the error here is you missed actually one bracket here. So when you say number equals int bracket, open bracket, input, open bracket, you
Okay.
close only one bracket here. So that's the error.
Okay.
Error.
Right, thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sir. when you have values for both values, because in previous one what we have seen, when the condition is true, you are going to multiply the number by -1, and not, then you are not going to do anything. But in this case, if the marks is 50, greater than 50, we are going to say pass, and if not, we are going to say fail. So that means we have if and else. So make a note of here. So you end with colon, and then after that you have else and colon. So let's try with this one. So we can take, let me start with this. Let me type. Let me increase the size of the font so that it'll be clear to you. Right, I'm going to get a new code window. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get marks from a user. Let's say I'm going to integer value, enter marks. And then depend on the marks, I'm going to display two things. If marks greater than or equal to 50, colon, then we are going to say print pass. So in this one, we have else part as well. So you go back, else, colon, and then you say print fail. So if you run this, it lasts marks, let's say 80. If you put 80, so it says pass. The first one, we have a nested if statements. That means we have if structure inside another if, and then with else if, we are combine these two together. So if I rerun, won't change much. So let's say -5. So it says size. So elif statement we use, I won't actually demonstrate that one here. The elif statement we use here to combine else and if together, right? It's called else if, we call elif, right? So more when you have multiple selections, right, or nested selections, you can use if, elif, and else. At the end, you can use in. Let me share this code as well, so then you can try it out. So if you want to try out this idle environment, you better use a new window like this. I'm closing this one. I will share the screen to yes, and I go to file, new file. I'll take a new window, and then I will copy paste. Since I have copied this one, let's say Control V. We have this. Let me save it. File save. And if I run it, the code, the output will come here. Run module. So temperature, let me say 105. So it says T. So I ran in both ways so that if I use in different way, we will use this. Now I actually want to continue this idle environment till we talk about the file handling, because files are created and easy to start with there. And once after that, when we have the metro session, I'm completely going to switch to a Colab environment. So data analysis, machine learning part, it's very easy to keep this as a one single notebook. So I'll be switching. So right now we still go through the basics, and right now we are looking at control structures. Three main parts when you talk about the loops. That means the starting value, the initialization in this particular case, increment or decrement, right? And the condition. So for example, if you want to iterate something, so you set starting point as 1, and then you increase by 1, and then you specify how many times you want to repeat this. So that's basically a while loop, right? Let me put this in a Jupyter notebook, right? So in this particular case, we will look at right. So I'm getting a new code window for this. Okay. Right. So this time I'm going to talk about the while loop. So the number, oh, let me put in simply, is the counter variable where we could use this to iterate anything. Now, for example, while loop, we will iterate this to 10 times. Yes, the number 10, and then let's say print in, and then simply you can have n equals n plus 1, right? So simply when you write this, you will get printing numbers from 1 to 10. Now simply this will specify the initialization starting value, and then increment, and this will iterate the number of times. Now instead of that, let's say we want to do the same task, let's say calling a function 10 times, you can replace whatever here. Now for example, I can say, okay, Python workshop. What will happen? Instead of printing the number, this time this will repeat 10 times. Yes. So let's say you are going to get some input. So you can say input. Enter name. Whatever you put it here, it will repeat 10 times. Right. You can do this 10 times. put in the values here. So print it. So that's about the while loop. Anything you want to iterate. All right, depends on what you want to do, so you can change this. So I'm not going to go into details, but whenever comes in, I will explain how we may use it. And then the for loop. Now the same thing, we can put in the for loop, more compact coding. So for loops. Now for that, you have to learn another function called range function, right? Now this is how range function works. So there are three parts in the range function, right? If it is only one value, then you have only n value. Now, for example, if you say range 5, right? Range 5, the value starts with 0, then goes up to 4. 5 is the stop value, stop and step we used to say. So we start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes up to 5, not including 5. But if you use range, two values, that means you specify start and stop. Right? And now, for example, if you say range 1, 5, 1, 5. So that means this will create a set of values or list of numbers starting from 1 to 4. If you have three values, then you have start, stop, and step. That means, let's say range. If you say start with 1, let me say start with 2, goes up to, let's say 10, step is 2. Now let me say start with 3, goes up to 10 with a step 2. So which means you start with 3, so that is 3. Then stop is 10, it goes up to 10, not including 10, with the step of 2. 2 means 3 plus 2 is 5, next number. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 plus 2 is 9, that's all. Right? So this is how the use of range function. Right. Now let's see how we may write a for loop. The same thing we did earlier, we can use this. We can say for whatever the variable. Let's say you want to print 1 to 10 like in earlier. So you start with 1, goes up to 11, not include 11. That means it will print 1 to 10. Right? So if I go back, the same thing if I write in for loop, right? This is the same thing. Let me take a new code. If I say for in range, we can 1, 10. And then we can say print it. Simple. 1, 11. Sorry. So it will print 1 to 10 numbers. If you just specify the first value, then that will start with 0. And then if you pass with, let's say 1 comma 11 color step, let me say 2, then it starts with 1, then next 3, 5, 7, and 9. So that's how the range function works. So let me copy paste this one in case if you have any issues, so you can let me know. So let's put 1 comma 10. Let's go with 1 comma 11. So it will be 1 to 10. Let me copy paste again in the chat. If you're finished, let me know. And if you're having any issues, also please let me know. Function works. Now, for example, we are already learned how to use print function, type functions, and so on. Even now we have discussed range function. So you comes with a name. So def is the keyword to say that, okay, you are going to create a function called name. And then what parameters? Parameters, sometimes you know that in a function you get values, right? Okay, you are calculating the sum of numbers, so you can say sum. Then you can put the values in parameters, right? And within the body, you can define the name. Okay, now let me create a function for you, right? Let me share the screen again. And let me get the 2. Right. Now let's first try it here. Let me code window. I'm going to say add 2 comma 3. If I run it, then it will get error because there's no function called add. So now I'm going to create a function, right? So I'm going to define the function. So I can say def add. I'm going to define a add function with 2 numbers. Let me say n1 comma n2. And what should happen if we provide the n1 and n2? We want to just print n1 plus n2, isn't it? So this is what we want to do. Now next time when you say add 2 comma 3, there's no function earlier. Now we have just created a function called add to add 2 numbers and display the answer. So when you run it, you get answer 5. So that is adding a number. Okay, so that's all actually I want to discuss today. The time is up. Maybe we can continue the discussion in the next session as well. Hopefully, you can go through the material and come. I know that sometimes this is too slow for some of the participants, if you're familiar with, but it's still, I want to make it on average. I want to go with all the participants, right? So let me again share the code with you. So let me copy paste the code.